I never thought I'd be standing here looking at my parents' front door again after all these years. My name is Vanessa, and this house holds the memories I've tried so hard to forget. My phone feels heavy in my pocket. It's still warm from the unexpected call from my mom, who asked me to come urgently. My car is in the driveway, and I can't help but think about my 9-year-old daughter, Emma, whom I just took to my friend Sarah. It'll only take a couple of hours, I told Emma, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The last time I had a proper conversation with my parents was at my grandmother's funeral 3 years ago. It was that terrible day when I was 18 when they chose my sister Lisa over me. I still remember standing in this very spot, tears streaming down my face, when they told me they would give my college money to Lisa for her wedding. But this is my education. I shouted then. Your sister needs a real wedding, Mom said firmly. You can take out student loans like everyone else. I left that day and never came back. Grandma was the only one who stayed by my side. She helped me pay for my tuition at a community college, not the prestigious university I dreamed of, but it was better than nothing. I worked, studied, clung to every chance not to drown, and eventually graduated, built my own life. The following years were blurry and full of small victories. I met Jack in my senior year of college. We got married, Emma was born, and for a while it seemed to me that life had finally turned on me. Even after the divorce 2 years ago, everything remained civilized. Jack pays good alimony, and we both put Emma first. Now, at 36, I finally feel like I have stability. I bought the apartment in which Emma and I live with an inheritance from my grandmother. God bless her soul. This apartment generates rental income, and between alimony and my job at Marshall & Associates, I can afford to spend more time with my daughter. Taking a deep breath, I finally ring the doorbell. Whatever they want, I'll just listen, I tell myself. I'm not that scared 18-year-old Vanessa anymore. My mom opens the door, and her enthusiasm takes me by surprise. She looks older than I remember, with more gray in her hair, deeper wrinkles around her eyes, and a strange smile. Dad stands behind her, his habitual seriousness softened by some barely noticeable anxiety. Where's Emma? Mom asks, looking behind me, as if expecting to see her granddaughter on the threshold. She's at a friend's. I quickly reply, taking a step inside. You said it was urgent. The house smells the same as before. Mom's vanilla air freshener mixes with the tart aroma of Dad's coffee. Everything in the living room looks a little shabby. The chic furniture bought for Lisa's wedding betrays its age. Would you like some tea? Mom asks, twisting her fingers. Just tell me why you called. Years passed, and suddenly something became urgent. Mom lowers her head. Her shoulders are shaking. She's crying. Not with quiet, restrained tears, as in my childhood, but deeply, unrestrainedly. Dad puts his hand on her back, pats her comfortingly, but his face remains tense. I feel like something is getting cold inside of me. We're going to lose the house, he finally says. I remain silent, knowing that this is not all. There's always something else with them. Your sister. My mother sobs, and I feel a familiar cramp in my stomach. Of course, it's because of Lisa. She asked us to take out a business loan for Tom. Dad continues, looking at the floor. We used the house as collateral. Let me guess, I say, trying to keep my voice steady, but feeling like everything is boiling inside. Lisa doesn't pay? Dad hunches over and slowly runs his hand over his face before nodding uncertainly. Tom, his business went bankrupt, he finally explains, still looking everywhere but at me. They try to hold on, but Lisa and the kids, they're struggling, they've stopped paying, and we can't cover it ourselves. Something breaks inside me, and before I can stop myself, I start laughing. Bitterly, quietly, but with a kind of wild, desperate merriment that cannot be contained. Mom abruptly raises her head. Her eyes are full of horror. Dad looks at me as if I've lost my mind. Maybe it is. Is that why you named me? I say, cocking my head to the side, as if assessing them. The daughter who was abandoned, the one whose educational fund was given away to get you out of another crisis that Lisa created. Mom frantically wipes her tears with the back of her hand, blinks quickly, gathering her courage. "We know you're fine," she finally says, smiling weakly, as if this argument should soften me up. "Your apartment, rental income. We wouldn't have asked if we weren't desperate." I stand there and look at these people who have preferred Lisa to me all my life, who didn't even send me an invitation to her wedding, who barely bothered to acknowledge my existence at my grandmother's funeral because Lisa was pregnant at the time. And that, of course, was the most important thing. They only come to me when they need something. And this time, as always, it's about Lisa. "I'll think about it," I hear myself say, and I'm as surprised as they are. I turn around and head for the exit, feeling my fingers tremble as I grab the door handle. I need to pick up Emma. I'm leaving, but I can't get rid of the feeling that I'm standing on the verge of something huge. I'm going to make either the biggest mistake or the most important decision of my life. In any case, nothing will ever be the same again. "Mom, why are you crying?" Emma asks as she jumps into the car. I blink, touching my cheek in confusion, realizing that I really cried without even noticing it during the trip. My thoughts were bothering me. "Just thinking, honey," I say, smiling quickly to reassure her. Emma tilted her head, studying me closely. "About what?" I sigh, trying to find the words. "I saw your grandparents today." Emma's eyes light up instantly. "The ones? Which ones are in the photos?" I'm nodding. "May I meet them?" Of course she would like to. They're her grandparents, even if they've never bothered to be a part of her life. I barely slept for the next week, replaying endless scenarios in my head. Sarah, my friend, looked at me with undisguised bewilderment while we were sitting in a cafe, having our morning coffee. "You're crazy," she said, shaking her head. "Maybe," I admitted, cupping the cup in my hands to warm my fingers. "But Emma deserves a chance to get to know them. And, to be honest, maybe I need it too. Maybe I need to finally face it all." And now, a week later, I'm driving down a familiar road again. But this time Emma is jumping up and down in the passenger seat next to me, chattering nonstop about what she'll say when she sees Grandma and Grandpa. The meeting was strange. Mom started crying again, and Dad looked awkward, like he didn't know what to do with his hands. Everything changed when Emma suddenly ran up to them and wrapped them in a strong baby hug. They froze, as if they didn't understand what was happening, and then I saw something unexpected in their eyes. Real joy. The one I once saw aimed exclusively at Lisa. We spent the whole day there. I watched as Emma nonchalantly told them about everything, about school, about friends, about how she won a spelling contest. She showed them her drawings, shared stories they didn't know because they weren't around. And they listened, carefully, with genuine interest. And, at some point, I saw something else in their eyes. Regret. When we returned home, Emma was chatting happily in the back seat, scattering enthusiastic words about her grandparents. I looked at the road in front of me and realized that I had already made a decision. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm setting myself up for even more pain. But I'm going to help them. The next day, when I woke up earlier than usual, the first thing I did was call my real estate agent and, without hesitation, arranged to rent out my apartment again. This decision seemed both reckless and right to me. I understood that by taking this step, I would no longer be able to back down, that I was tying myself to my parents' home and all its unresolved problems. But perhaps for the first time in a long time, I felt that I was doing what I really should. I hung up, took a deep breath, braced myself, and then dialed my mom's number. "I'll help with the loan payments," I said quickly, before I could change my mind. There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a second I thought the call had been interrupted, but then I heard her sob, "Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you so much. I'm moving in with Emma," I continued before she could burst into a torrent of thanks. "The income from the rent of the apartment will be used to pay off the loan. I will help with the bills, but we need to set some boundaries." Mom was silent, but I felt her tense up. "I don't want Lisa to be a part of this. This is your house. You decide who to let in, but I'm not going to pay for it." Mom didn't answer, but her silence was eloquent enough for me. 2 weeks later, Emma and I moved in. I bought new household appliances, a gorgeous refrigerator with an ice maker, which delighted Emma, a dishwasher that really worked, and a washing machine that no longer sounded like it was about to explode. Dad's back problems, which had plagued him for years, began to go away when he no longer had to wash dishes by hand, and Mom seemed genuinely happy to see us under the same roof. Life got into a surprisingly comfortable rut. Every morning I was woken up by the smell of freshly brewed coffee and hot pancakes that my mother made for breakfast. And when I came home after work, Emma was already sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework under my mother's supervision. Dad, who switched to a part-time job, finally got rid of the constant back pain and seemed to really enjoy life for the first time in a long time. He taught Emma how to play chess, and their weekly matches soon became a family tradition. I found that I could afford to work more in the office, knowing that Emma was in safe hands. "We've noticed that you've been more and more devoted to your work lately, Mrs. Thompson," my boss, told me one day when she invited me into her office. "How do you feel about the promotion?" The new position meant more money, but also more responsibility, including regular business trips to other states. Previously, I would have refused right away. A single mother, no support system. It just wouldn't work. But now everything has changed. "I agree," I heard myself say, and was surprised at how confident it sounded. The first time I had to go on a business trip, I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. 3 days in Chicago seemed like an eternity to me, and even though I told myself 1,000 times, "She's going to be fine," the anxiety wouldn't let go of me until I got back. But everything was really fine. Mom sent me pictures of Emma doing homework, having dinner, playing with Dad. They even sent me a video of Emma proudly showing how she baked her first pie. Everything worked as it should. But over time, I started to notice little things that bothered me. For example, Lisa's calls. Every time she called my mom, she went to her room, and when she came out, her eyes were red, and from the way she abruptly changed the subject as soon as I entered, I guessed that these were not just family conversations. One day, while setting up my mom's new tablet, I noticed notifications about bank transfers. The money went to Lisa. I pressed my lips together and tapped the screen with my finger. "Mom, what is this?" She sighed, not looking up at me. "She needs help." "What kind of help?" "Sometimes they don't have enough to pay the rent, or for groceries." Mom nervously clasped her hands. "I'm paying all your bills," I reminded him. "And the loan that Lisa didn't pay off. How is it fair that you also send her money?" Mom abruptly raised her head. "You don't understand." She suddenly flared up for the first time in a long time, switching to a raised tone. "It's not Lisa's fault that Tom's business failed. She has 2 children, Vanessa. They need to be fed." I crossed my arms over my chest, "And I have 1 child and all your bills which also need to be fed." Mom turned away, interrupting the conversation, as she always did when it came to Lisa. These arguments became more frequent, but I tried to ignore them, because otherwise everything was going well. Emma was happy, I was moving up the career ladder, and most of the time it seemed that we were healing old wounds, albeit slowly, albeit with reservations. Sometimes it even seemed to me that this house, once filled with nothing but pain and resentment for me, was beginning to become something like a real home. One day, after several glasses of wine, Dad suddenly said something I never expected to hear. "We made mistakes," he said, without looking up from his glass. I froze, not knowing what to say, because those words were too meaningful, too important, and I didn't want them to just disappear into thin air. "I know," I finally said, and maybe for the first time in my entire life, he actually heard me. I wanted to say more, I wanted to ask why, I wanted him to finally say out loud that he preferred Lisa to me, that back then, many years ago, he also understood that it was wrong, that when I screamed in tears, begging to leave me my own money for education, he knew which makes a mistake, but chose it anyway. But Mom quickly changed the subject, talking about Emma's upcoming school play, and the moment was lost. 3 years have passed. Emma turned 12. She looked more mature every day, and sometimes I found myself looking at her and couldn't believe how quickly time had passed. I got used to my new role at work. I traveled every few weeks, but I always returned home to a happy daughter. Loan payments were stable. The bills were paid. Life has finally acquired the stability I've been striving for so long. And then that Tuesday came. I remember it was Tuesday because I had just closed a big deal in Phoenix, feeling like I was on top of the world, and boarded an early flight home, determined to surprise Emma. But instead of my daughter's joyful exclamation, instead of the usual warm, familiar home, chaos greeted me. I heard voices in the driveway. There are too many voices. Too loud, too unfamiliar. When I opened the front door, I stepped right into the mess. Lisa was sprawled out on my parents' couch, the one I'd just pulled over last month, her legs casually thrown over the armrest, and two children were sitting next to her, a boy and a girl whom I recognized from photographs but had never met in person. Suitcases were scattered around the living room. Children's clothes were everywhere. Lisa was typing something on her phone, not even looking up when I entered. "Oh," she said lazily, and the tone of her voice sounded like I was trespassing. "Look who's here." And that's how I realized that everything was going to change again. But this time, I wasn't a naive 18-year-old girl, and I wasn't going to let history repeat itself. I slowly put down my bag and took a deep breath, feeling my blood boil in my veins. "Lisa," I said flatly, "what are you doing here?" She stretched lazily, as if this conversation was tiring her. "I left. Tom, he's a total loser." I stood there, still holding my work bag in my hand, and tried to make sense of what I had heard. "You left," I repeated slowly. "And what does that mean?" Lisa shrugged her shoulders as if it was the most insignificant question in the world. "So now we're going to live here." I blinked at him. "Here, in the house where I pay all the bills and the loan that you haven't paid?" Lisa crossed her arms over her chest, and annoyance appeared on her face. "Oh, that's it. Miss Perfect with her money and her job. Some of us have real problems, Vanessa. Real problems." I felt like something was exploding inside of me. How, for example, to take out a huge loan in the name of our parents and then not pay it off. "Girls, please," Mom finally found her voice, but it sounded shaky, as if she had already given up in advance. "We're a family. We need to stick together in times like this." I laughed briefly, feeling the familiar bitterness rising inside. "How convenient," I said, cocking my head to the side. "It's funny how family becomes important when you need something. Where was that family spirit when you gave my college money? Or when you didn't even invite me to Lisa's wedding?" Mom pressed her lips into a thin line, but Lisa abruptly turned to me. "Oh, come on," she exclaimed, throwing up her hands. "That was 100 years ago. Can't you just let it go? Can't you just take responsibility for your life?" I retorted. Lisa flushed, but didn't answer. I looked at my parents. Dad sat staring at the floor as if he wanted to sink into the ground, and Mom looked at me with pleading eyes.
"Your sister needs us now," she said.
I closed my eyes, feeling my insides churn with anger. I should have seen this coming, but this time I wasn't going to accept their decision in silence. The next few weeks were tense, like a string stretched to the limit, ready to snap at any moment. Lisa continued to lie on the couch all day, buried in her phone or staring at the TV, not even pretending to look for work, while her children ran noisily around the house, turning everything upside down, creating chaos that no one except Emma and me tried to clean up. But that wasn't what hurt me the most. I could close my eyes to the mess. I could accept that groceries were disappearing twice as fast as usual. I could even temporarily ignore the bills that I continued to pay alone, despite the fact that there were now 3 more people living in the house. I was hurt by how my parents had suddenly changed. Emma became invisible to them. One day, beaming with pride, she ran up to her mom, holding her math test with a large A in her hands, but her mom just waved her away, too busy helping Michael pass the next level in his video game. Emma blinked, clutched the test in her hands, and slowly lowered it without saying a word, but I saw her eyes go out, and I wanted to scream. Another time, she timidly approached Dad when he was sitting on the porch, and hopefully asked if they would play chess like before, but he, without even thinking, replied that he was too tired. Just a couple of minutes before he got up, went out into the garden, and spent 2 hours chasing a ball with Anna in the backyard. I waited, hoping that it would pass, that it was just a transitional period, that everything would return to normal soon. But the longer I watched what was happening, the more I realized that something else had become the norm for parents. "Mom?" I bumped into her one night after Emma had gone to bed. "What's going on?" Why did you treat Emma like that? Mom sighed in annoyance, as if I had asked a stupid question. Don't make me laugh, Vanessa, she said. Emma is already big. She doesn't need so much attention, and Anna and Michael are still small.
They need support now.
Support? I felt my voice rising. You can also support Emma. She also needs the attention of her grandparents. But Mom had already turned away, hurrying to the kitchen, where Lisa called her, demanding more snacks. 2 months dragged on like a viscous, tedious torture, and I threw myself into work, taking on additional projects, staying in the office until late at night, just so as not to return to the house, which increasingly ceased to be mine. Lisa was still looking for a job, and my parents seemed to be in complete agreement that this could go on forever. She's going through a difficult time, Dad explained to me when I once again raised this issue. She needs to think about the kids, Mom would add, as if my arguments didn't matter at all. Meanwhile, I continued to pay for everything, the mortgage, bills, groceries, which were now disappearing at such a rate, as if an army of hungry wolves lived in the house instead of a family. But money wasn't what bothered me the most. What was eating away at me the most was the realization that I was seeing Emma becoming a ghost in her own home. Then came that Wednesday. I purposely left work early, deciding to pick up Emma and arrange our little escape to go for ice cream, as we used to do when the house got too tense. But when I got to the front door, I heard screams. You're a lazy, good-for-nothing kid. Lisa's voice echoed throughout the house. Look at this mess. Take it away immediately. I opened the door and saw Emma on her knees, picking up the scattered toys from the floor. Toys that I instantly recognized as Michael's stuff. What's going on here? I asked, barely able to contain my anger. Lisa lazily turned to me, crossing her arms over her chest. Your precious princess refused to help with the housework, she spat out with a sneer. She thinks she's too good to clean up after her cousins. I looked at the toys. Do you mean that your children have scattered things, and now my daughter has to clean up after them? Lisa shrugged, as if it was obvious. Someone has to keep this house in order. And since you're never there, I felt like everything was boiling inside. I'm never here because I'm working, I said through gritted teeth, unlike some people who lie on the couch all day, waiting for everyone else to provide for them. The argument that followed was disgusting. Lisa instantly turned around and ran to her parents, bursting into tears and complaining about how I was insulting her, humiliating her, and bullying her. Of course, they sided with her. Vanessa, you need to be more understanding, Mom pleaded, folding her hands, as if she was not facing an adult daughter, but an outsider who needed to be persuaded to help. Lisa's children, Dad began, but I interrupted him. What about my baby? My voice cracked, but I didn't bother hiding my emotions. What about Emma? They were silent. They still haven't responded. When it came to choosing between Lisa and me, I knew that answer from the beginning. I thought it couldn't get any worse, but I had no idea what would happen next week. I had to fly to Seattle for an emergency meeting with a client. The situation required my personal presence, and even though the trip was supposed to last only 5 days, I was anxious to leave Emma in a house that no longer felt safe. Are you going to be okay? I asked for the 100th time at breakfast, trying to hide my nervousness. Emma looked at me and, shrugging her shoulders, forced a smile. I'll be fine, Mom, she assured him, trying to look confident, though there was a hint of doubt in her voice. I have a phone and we can video chat every evening. I nodded, but something inside me tightened painfully. 3 days later, around 9 p.m. in Seattle, when I had just returned to my hotel room after a long conversation, my phone rang. A picture of Emma flashed on the screen. Mom. Her daughter's voice was low, choked with sobs. Mom, I'm outside. Lisa kicked me out. I froze. What? I whispered, feeling my heart start pounding.
She said.
She said I was at her house, but now I'm not going back there anymore. I'm on my way. I only have my phone. I didn't know what to do. The world stopped spinning. My 12-year-old daughter, alone at night, on the street. With shaking hands, I dialed the number of Sarah, my best friend, who lived nearby. Sarah, please, can you pick up Emma? It's near my parents' house. Of course, I'm on my way, she replied immediately, without any questions, for which I was eternally grateful to her. Then I called Lisa. On the fifth ring, she finally answered, her voice sounding annoyed, as if I had interrupted her rest. "Oh, well, did the princess call you?" she drawled with a sneer. "Maybe now she'll learn not to be so stubborn. She's always arguing, always thinks she's the best." I hung up because if I had continued listening, I probably would have said something to her that I would regret later. I immediately called my mom. She answered almost immediately, and even for a second I allowed myself to believe that she was worried, that she cared. "Your granddaughter is outside." My voice was cold and firm. "Did you know that? Did you see Lisa kick her out?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. And then Mom spoke, and her voice was hard, alien, like I'd never heard it before. "Maybe it's better this way, Vanessa. Maybe you and Emma should look for another place to live. You don't fit in here anymore." That was the moment when everything became very clear. Some things never change. Some people never change. I took a deep breath, clutching the phone in my hand, and calmly, without anger, just answered with icy clarity. "You're right, Mom. We're not right for each other. We never got close." Then I hung up, logged into the airline's app, and booked my first morning flight home. It was time to end this cycle once and for all. The flight home was the longest 5 hours of my life. Sarah sent me messages every half hour updating me on Emma, but I couldn't calm down until I was next to my daughter, until I hugged her, until I was sure she was really safe. When I finally got to Sarah's house at 3 o'clock in the morning, Emma was curled up on the couch, sleeping, and even in her sleep there was sadness on her face. And there were still traces of dried tears on her cheeks. She told me what happened, Sarah whispered as I knelt next to my daughter, gently running my hand through her hair. "Vanessa, it's worse than you think." I looked up, and my heart sank at her words. "What do you mean?" According to Emma, Lisa treated her like a servant for weeks, forcing her to clean the house, cook food for her children, wash their clothes. Sarah sighed heavily. And when Emma finally stood in her way, saying that she needed to study for the exam, Lisa got angry. I clenched my hands into fists, feeling an icy rage rise inside me. What did she do? She yelled at her, told her to get out of the house. Emma replied that you were paying for everything, and then Lisa grabbed her arm and pushed her towards the door. I froze. "She's what? And your parents?" Sarah looked at me with pain and anger. "They were just watching. They were watching it. And they didn't do anything." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just looked at my sleeping daughter and tried to realize how wrong I was, allowing myself to believe for a moment that this family could change. I let Emma sleep while I spent the night on the phone. First, I called my rental agency, explained the situation, and asked for help from me and the current tenants to terminate the contract ahead of schedule so that I could return to my apartment. Then I called my lawyer to find out what legal rights I have with respect to all the household appliances and furniture that I bought for my parents' house. I wasn't going to leave them anything else. And then I called the transportation company to arrange our relocation. This time, I was leaving for good. The next morning, I took Emma to her favorite diner for breakfast, a small, cozy place that smelled of fresh pancakes, hot maple syrup, and cinnamon, where there was always the same table by the window where we liked to sit. But this time, Emma wasn't smiling or chatting excitedly as usual, but just silently picking at her plate, tearing off small pieces from the pancake and not bringing them to her mouth. I waited, giving her time. But then I put my hand over hers and said softly, "Baby, I need you to be honest with me." Emma flinched slightly, but didn't look up. "Has this happened before?" My voice was steady, but inside, everything was clenched in a painful premonition. "Did Lisa hurt you before I left?" She was silent for a long time, but then she nodded. "She told me everything," she whispered, barely audible. I froze. "Who told you everything?" Emma shrugged her shoulders as if it didn't matter. And then, still without looking up, she whispered, "She said I was spoiled." "Who?" "Lisa." Her daughter's voice trembled. "She said that I think I'm better than her children." I clenched my teeth. "That's what Grandma said," Emma continued, "that I need to know my place." My fingers gripped the coffee cups so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, trying not to sound too harsh. Emma shrugged her shoulders. Because you looked happy, she replied. You smiled more, and Grandma and Grandpa, they were cute sometimes when Aunt Lisa wasn't around. I reached across the table and squeezed her small, trembling hand. Listen to me, Emma, I said, trying to make every word stick in her mind. Nothing, absolutely nothing, matters more to me than you. Not my parents, not their house, none of that. We're leaving. Home. To our apartment. And this time we will stay there. Emma looked at me, and relief slowly began to form in her eyes, full of pain. After breakfast, we drove to my parents' house. Lisa's car wasn't there. She probably went on one of her mysterious errands, which, as I realized a long time ago, never had anything to do with finding a job. Mom opened the door, and a look of surprise flashed across her face. Vanessa, we weren't expecting you back so soon. I walked past her without saying a word. Emma's hand was gripping mine tightly. The team of movers I hired was already waiting outside. I told them to take away everything I had bought in the last 3 years. A refrigerator, a washing machine, a dishwasher, a new sofa, a TV. I walked through the house, pointing out every single thing that was supposed to go with me now. Mom gasped when she saw the movers rolling the refrigerator away from the wall. You can't do this. Her voice rose to a panic squeal. I turned to her, pulling papers out of my bag. Actually, I can, I replied calmly, handing the movers proof of purchase of every item in this house. It's all mine. Dad returned home while the movers were working. He stood in the doorway and silently watched them dismantle the entertainment system that I bought him last Christmas. Vanessa, he began, but I interrupted him. Don't, Dad. He looked away. You were watching, I said, feeling my voice tremble. Not from weakness, but from rage. You watched Lisa pushing your granddaughter out the door. You chose her over me again, and this time you chose her instead of Emma. Mom opened her mouth, but I didn't let her say a word. We're done, I said coldly. Vanessa. My mother's voice sounded fragile, pleading, but I didn't care. I turned to both of them. You'll have to deal with it yourself. I saw them turn pale. Just like I had to deal with college myself. Just like Emma had to figure out how to survive when she was kicked out of her own house at night. I paused, giving them a chance to process my words. Consider this my last payment for all the times you chose Lisa over me. The next few months were interesting. My parents and Lisa didn't give up without a fight. The calls started the very next day. First from Mom. Then from Dad. Then from Lisa. Then it was from my mom again. They left voicemails ranging from angry accusations to tearful pleas. Text messages were even worse. Screenshots of their overdue bills. Photos of Lisa's children with sad faces. Attempts to appeal to my guilt. Trying to make me understand how they can lose the house. Mom even sent me pictures of my old bedroom, as if that could somehow change my mind. But all I felt when I looked at these photos was relief. I didn't belong in this house anymore. And now my life was finally starting over. Why don't you answer them? Emma asked one evening when my phone vibrated with another text message. We sat on the balcony of our apartment, sharing a large pizza, watching the sunset slowly turn the sky orange and pink, and listening to the muted hum of the city, which was now our home, and not just a place where we temporarily live. I glanced at my phone, but I didn't even look at who the message was from. I already knew. Mom, Dad, or Lisa. Probably another attempt to appeal to my conscience. A reminder of family ties, which in fact meant only one thing. Their desires and needs should always be above mine. Because sometimes the best answer is not to answer anything at all, I said, putting the phone away. Emma nodded, and there was a glint of understanding in her eyes that was too deep for a 12-year-old child. I miss playing chess with my grandfather sometimes, she confessed after a long pause. But not by how they made me feel when Aunt Lisa was around. I held her close, inhaling the scent of shampoo in her hair, and smiled, trying not to show how my heart ached for her.
We can find you a chess teacher if you want, I said.
You can learn from someone who won't stop playing with you just because your cousin shows up. Emma smiled faintly but didn't say anything, just snuggled closer to me. The weeks turned into months, and time inexorably took us further away from the life that I once thought was the only possible one. Through family videos and casual conversations with relatives, I found out that my parents had returned to full-time work, struggling to pay bills, and the bank was threatening to confiscate their house for non-payment of a loan they had never been able to cover. Lisa still wasn't working and kept complaining about me to anyone who was willing to listen. I no longer paid their bills, but the money that used to go to their needs now went to us. I took Emma on weekend trips. We went to theme parks, went hiking, attended cooking classes, tried new restaurants, and just enjoyed the silence, which was no longer filled with screams, accusations, and endless demands for more money. Without the constant drama at my parents' house, I could focus more on my work. And for the first time in many years, I felt like I was really living and not just surviving. Emma's grades improved, and now that no one was bothering her, she joined the school chess club and even made new friends. Sometimes I noticed her looking at old photos taken at my parents' house, but she never asked to come back. One Sunday morning, almost a year after we left, I was making breakfast when Emma came into the kitchen. "Mom," she said thoughtfully, watching me beat the eggs. "Are you happy now?" I froze for a second, then continued to move the whisk, but this time consciously, really thinking about her question. Was I happy? I was happy that I got away from a toxic situation. I was happy that I had protected my daughter. I was happy that I had finally broken free from the habit of always putting Lisa first. I smiled and looked at her. "Yes, Emma, I'm finally happy." Emma smiled back, that bright, carefree smile I hadn't seen on her face in too many years. "I like that it's just us," she said, sitting down at the table. Later that day, I deleted my parents' phone numbers. I saved their voice messages, but moved them to a separate folder called Never Again, in case I ever start to doubt my decision. I learned from relatives that the bank had indeed confiscated my parents' house in the end, and they had to move into a small apartment. Lisa, as it turned out, had found a new man on whom she now depended. Sometimes I wondered if they had ever realized what they had done wrong, or are they still convincing themselves that I'm selfish, that I betrayed my family, that I had to keep saving them no matter what. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. Emma and I had a small family, but a real family. We traveled when we wanted to. They laughed when they wanted to, and we never had to apologize for just taking up space in our own home. The money I once spent on my parents' bills now went to Emma's college fund, and this time no one was going to give them to someone else's wedding.